The Colt Gateway is a beginner level BMX bike that costs about $429 and it weighs around 26 pounds. In this review, we're going to talk about the quality, the geometry, the street score, park score, dirt. We're going to talk about everything that you need to know about this bike. And I'm going to help you decide if you should buy this bike or if you need to find a different bike. So let's get right into it. The first thing we need to talk about is some of the most commonly asked questions about the Colt Gateway. The first question that people have is, how much does this bike weigh? The Colt Gateway is gonna weigh around 26 pounds. If you go to Colt's website and you go down to weight, it's gonna say about 26 pounds. I think it's a little suspicious because other brands are like very on point with it, like 26.4, 26. There's no way this bike is like 26.00 pounds. So it could be plus or minus a little bit, but anyway, that is the weight of the bike. The next question is, can you upgrade this bike? Everything on the Colt Gateway is customizable and upgradable. So if you want to buy new handlebars, new forks, new bars, new pedals, whatever you want to upgrade it with, you can do so. Just purchase that part and put it on. You'll be good. Can you grind with the Colt Gateway? No, you can, but you need to buy pegs and hub guards. As it comes out of the box, the Colt Gateway doesn't have pegs, doesn't have hub guards, and it's like a level 10 skill to grind without pegs. So the answer is no. You need to buy pegs and hub guards for the Gateway if you wanna grind with it. You can buy them separately and put them on this bike. Then you can grind with it, but as it comes out of the box, the answer is no. Does the Colt Gateway have brakes? The Colt Gateway just has really standard U-brakes with non-removable brake mounts. So a lot of street riders like to take their brakes off and ride brakeless, and if you have removable brake mounts, you can get a really nice clean look on the frame. If you have non-removable brake mounts, they're welded on there, and it just shows like there was brakes on this bike. It doesn't look as clean, it's not the end of the world, and it's very typical for lower quality BMX bikes. The last question is, what kind of hub does this bike have? The Colt Gateway has a cassette hub with a 25:9 gear ratio. This is a very common gear ratio that you'll see on most complete BMX bikes, and a cassette hub has pedal pressure, not the same as a free coaster. That's what the Gateway has. Now, my first BMX bike was way too small for me. I didn't know that there was a correlation between top tube size and rider height. And so when I got my first bike, it was not the right size. And what this did is it made it really hard for me to learn tricks, made it really hard for me to have control over the bike and maneuver it. It was just tough. And I don't want that to happen to you. I want you to get the right bike. So let's talk about the size of this bike and what height is best for it. The Colt Gateway has a 20.5-inch top tube, and this top tube size is best for riders who are between 5'6" and 5'9". If you're a few inches taller or shorter than that, you're gonna be fine on this bike. But if you're a lot shorter or a lot taller, get something else, get the right size for you. I stress this so much. Most people buy bikes based off of color or based off of quality, and I think that that's the wrong approach. I think the best thing you can do is find bikes that are within your size and then find the best quality bike within that range, okay? Don't skip over this, because if you get a bike that's the wrong size, BMX is gonna be super hard for you. And if you're listening to this and you're like, oh man, I am 5'4" or I'm 6 foot, this bike is not right for you. And I will find you 3 bikes that are perfect for you if you request a free bike recommendation. This is a service I do for everyone who watches the channel. Click the link, give me some information about yourself, and I'm gonna find 3 bikes that are absolutely perfect for you for free. Now, alongside this top tube size is other frame geometries, and these frame geometries are going to have an effect on how the bike handles and how the bike feels. These geometries also have a pretty big effect on how good the bike is for street riding, dirt riding, or park riding, which we'll talk about later in the video. But the Colt Gateway comes with a 75-degree head tube angle, and we don't know the standover height. Colt doesn't list it on their website, but we can guess it's about 9 inches, as that's the most standard standover height that you're going to see on most BMX bikes. It has an 11.8-inch bottom bracket height, and then it has a 13.65-inch chainstay. The head tube angle and the standover height are pretty normal, but that 13.65-inch chainstay is incredibly long. This is going to give the bike a really stable back end. It's going to make it harder to get into manuals because your wheelbase is so much longer. Your front wheel is quite a bit longer quite a bit more farther away, Anyway, it's farther away from your front wheel, okay? Bigger wheelbase, your wheels are spread apart, and so you need a lot more leverage and a lot more oomph to get into a manual and to pick up that front end. So that's something that you don't see a chainstay length this tall on very many complete bikes at all. And that's just something that you need to point out. The 11.8 inch bottom bracket height is higher than normal also. And this higher bottom bracket height might counteract that long chainstay a little bit, because being taller up gives you a more snappy and responsive feeling on the bike with steering and with spins particularly. Okay, so that's how that geometry is going to affect the handling of the Colt Gateway. All right, I just wanted to pop in real quick while I'm editing this video and say thank you, Unity, for letting me come by and check out these BMX bikes and film some B-roll. It was so good to come in, see them in person, and it makes the video so much better for you guys. So if you're in the Phoenix area and you want a new bike, you want new parts, you need your bike worked on, swing by Unity Ride Shop and check them out. It's honestly one of the best BMX shops that I've been to, and you will not be disappointed. So I just wanted to jump in here, shout them out. Okay, let's get back on with the video. The geometries of the parts on the bike also will have an effect on the style and how the bike feels. The only thing to really talk about here is the 9-inch handlebar height and the 30-inch width on the handlebars. It's got 170 millimeter cranks, but none of that's really going to have a huge effect. I think that these handlebars are a good size for 5'6" to 5'9" riders who would be on this bike. And yeah, that's really all there is to talk about the geometry. Colt doesn't give you a lot of insight into what the geometries of the bike actually is. And so we just won't get into it. Now I put together a quality scoring system that's going to help you decide if this bike is actually a good quality, because that is a very common question. And you're probably wondering, is the Colt Gateway a good quality BMX bike? And I'm going to say no. This bike scored a 3.57 out of 10 in the quality scoring system, meaning it's a pretty low quality bike. And the main components, the quality of the main components, are the biggest reason for this quality score. So let's talk about that and let's break it down a little bit. So the Colt Gateway comes with a tri-moly frame. The forks have a chromoly steer tube and high tensile steel legs. The bars are fully high tensile steel. It has 3-piece 8-spline chromoly cranks, and then it has single wall Colt match rims. Now with this quality, the tri-moly frame adds chromoly in the top tube, the down tube, and the head tube, which gives your front end a lot more strength and durability. But the chainstay in the back end of this frame is going to be susceptible to bending and breaking. My first tri-moly BMX bike, I had an issue where I was doing 360s a lot, and then my back end just slowly bent like this. And so I could look down my frame and my frame would be crooked. And so that's just what happens with tri-moly frames. It's nice to have that quality in the front, but the back end does suffer when you're doing certain tricks like spins, tail whips, and things that take a lot of pressure there on that back wheel. And so that's just something to note. The forks have a chromoly steer tube, so the piece that goes through the frame is full chromoly, but the legs that hold the wheel are high tensile steel. And I'm sure you've seen, next time you go to the skate park, look at everyone's forks, and you'll see somebody who has forks that are just raked out like crazy. And if you're learning disasters or something on high tensile steel forks, your forks are going to bend out like this because of the constant pressure pushing them out when you do a disaster or case a jump or something like that. And then the last thing, single wall rims are not nearly as high quality as double wall rims. And so that's just kind of where this bike sits at in the quality spectrum. And that's why it only scored a 3.57 out of quality. These parts are designed for a lightweight beginner rider who's not going to put a lot of stress and a lot of impact on the parts. Now let's talk about some of the pros and cons for this BMX bike. Some of the pros, the Colt Vans tires are pretty popular tires and they grip really well in street. Another pro about this bike is the fact that it comes with some really unique and really cool looking colorways. Now some of the cons include the weak 410 chain, the lower quality parts altogether, and the lack of aftermarket parts. This bike doesn't have very many aftermarket parts. Most of the parts on it are pretty low quality, including that 410 chain. You might be getting into BMX because of a certain BMX rider who rides street. Maybe they ride park, maybe they ride dirt. For me, it was someone who rode street. And so I wanted a BMX bike that was good for street riding. Now I have a scoring system that comes up with a score for street, park, and dirt about all of the bikes. And this is based off of those geometries that we talked about earlier and the parts package that comes on the bike. And so let's decide what type of riding the Colt Gateway is best for. So the Colt Gateway scored a 2.19 in street, a 2.5 in park, and a 4 in dirt, making this bike best for dirt riding. The reason that it scored so high for dirt is mostly due to that longer chainstay and the more stable geometry. The bike doesn't have a really responsive front end or responsive parts package that makes it good for snappy street riding or park riding. You can't even put a gyro on this bike if you wanted to, because the head tube has an hourglass shape. You can't put gyros on it, or you can't drill the holes for the gyro. Most frames have holes included, so you can put a gyro on it. Like, this bike is very anti-park and anti-street. With that being said though, there are upgrades you can make to every single BMX bike to make it better for a certain type of riding. And so if you want to get the Colt Gateway and you want to ride street, that's possible. You just need to make some upgrades. And I put together a free PDF that shows you what upgrades are best for what type of riding. And that's free. The link for that is in the description. For example, if you wanted to grind with this bike, some of the best upgrades would be pegs and hub guards, because you can throw it on and that's going to drastically increase the street score, having pegs and hub guards on there. Second upgrade I would do to this bike would probably be the cranks. The cranks would make the bike a little bit lighter and just add really high quality cranks to your ride, something that you can rely on, something that you can trust. If you're doing big drops, you don't have to worry about your cranks breaking. And the third upgrade would probably be some forks that are full chromoly and not half chromoly like the ones that are included on the Gateway, and with a little bit, with a steeper offset. You know, get some forks with a 28mm offset, maybe 25mm offset, so it's easier to get into nose manuals and it pulls that front wheel a little bit closer to the back wheel. So if you're considering the Colt Gateway, you also need to check out the Kink Whip, the Sabrosa Salvador, and the Sunday Forecaster. These are three bikes that are similar to the Colt Gateway in quality and in price, but you might like one of those bikes better. So check out those three bikes next. You might be wondering if the Colt Gateway comes with a warranty, and the answer to that is kind of. On Colt's website, they talk about having a warranty for frames, and I'm really unsure if that warranty, like that frame warranty, is included on the frames on complete bikes. I'm gonna assume yes, and if so, it's a 1-year warranty against manufacturer defects on just that frame. Now, this is not the best warranty, like it's really not a good warranty compared to some other brands' warranties, and it's very important to make sure that you buy your bike from a trusted shop who's going to take care of you even if you have any issues with your bike. And that's why I buy all of my parts from Danscomp. They literally have a phone number that you can call, talk to a BMX expert right away, and ask them questions about what's going on with your bike, and just like pick their brain, man. It's so helpful, and it's so important to have a shop who's going to help you out if you have any issues with your purchase from them. Now, if you're wondering what's different about this current year model versus last year's model, you need to check out the review I did on bmxnerds.com. That review at the bottom of the page talks about what's different and what's new, because sometimes the new model has slight changes that the old model didn't. And so I talk about that in the blog post there. Head there next if you're curious about those changes. Personally, I think the Colt Gateway at MSRP is a little bit overpriced for the quality that you're getting. If you check out those other three bikes that I mentioned, you might find a bike that's better quality, better geometry for a similar price. Colt Gateway is a good bike if there's a brand new rider who wants to just start riding bikes and they're between 5'6" and 5'9". But this bike won't last you as you start to progress. Like I said, the quality is beginner quality. And that's because those components are designed for beginner riding. If you're doing higher end riding, they're not gonna last very long. And I also wouldn't recommend this bike if you're over like 150 pounds, because your weight's gonna stress the parts quite a bit. The Colt Gateway was not good enough to make it on my list of the top 11 BMX bikes. But if you wanna see what bikes did make it onto that list, that video is gonna pop up on the screen right now, and then you can watch that next and check out the top 11 bikes for this year. We'll see you guys in the next video.